Welcome to my channel. The Princess of the Stars Disaster 2008. The Princess of the Stars was first built in 1984. She was the largest Ro-Pax ferry in Japan at the time when she first went into service. Her maiden voyage was on July 10, 1984. She had been designed to survive rough seas. She serviced many years, but was retired from service in Japan in 2004, and would be sold onto Sulpicio Lines, where she was refitted to hold up to 1,992 passengers. She would go on to sail for many more years until 2008, when disaster would strike. On June 20, 2008, the Princess of the Stars left the port of Manila, where she was en route to Cebu City. At the time, Typhoon Frank had made landfall at Samar Island, but the Princess of the Stars would still be permitted to depart, as she was deemed large enough to stay afloat. However, this would all change, and the ferry would be plunged into danger. It was at midday on June 21 that the Princess of the Stars would put out a distress signal. Not long after that, all radio contact was lost with the ferry. A speedboat would be sent out to investigate, and confirmed they could see a hole in the hull of the ferry, and that it was at the time partially submerged. Sadly, several bodies would also be found nearby. It was reported that the total number of people on board that day was 747, however Sulpicio Lines then reported that there were 755 passengers and 111 crew members on board. It was then reported that only 56 people had been found alive, and that at least 814 people were feared dead or missing. Survivors of the Princess of the Stars reported that the ferry had run into rough seas off the coast of Romblon, and that at around 11:30 that day, passengers were advised to put on their life jackets. It would be just 15 minutes later that the captain then gave the order to abandon ship. Survivors reported seeing people jumping into the sea, while others made it to life rafts. However, survivors would also state that crew members were more concerned about saving themselves and were not helping passengers get to safety. The Princess of the Stars would finally capsize at 1 p.m. that day, leaving anyone still inside trapped. By June 23, 4 bodies had been recovered from the scene by the Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy. 35 bodies and 40 survivors also washed ashore at Burias Island the same day, but reports stated that the bodies could have been from the Princess of the Stars, but also may have been from other vessels that had also capsized during the typhoon. On June 24, the Coast Guard reported that only 115 people had been accounted for, which included 48 survivors and 67 bodies, leaving hundreds more unaccounted for. Sadly, when Navy divers entered the ferry, they did not find any more survivors inside. Recovery efforts had to be ceased on June 27 after the discovery of dangerous pesticides on board, which was illegal to transport on board a passenger vessel. This now needed to be removed safely before any more recovery efforts could take place. The victims' families accused Sulpicio Lines and the Coast Guard of negligence in allowing the ferry to depart in the first place when they knew about the typhoon. They would also blame Sulpicio Lines for not informing them about the tragedy themselves. Sulpicio Lines would claim that the ferry was never advised by the Coast Guard not to set sail that day, and that's why they departed. The recovery efforts began again on October 27 until November 10. 199 bodies would be recovered, but more were feared trapped inside in the places where it was too unsafe to enter. It wouldn't be until May 2010 when the wreck was cut in half and towed to shallow waters, where the divers could now safely enter and continue the search. They would find another 47 set of human remains inside, which had to be sent for forensic testing. An investigation was conducted into the tragedy. The BMI's final report was submitted, where they would find that Sulpicio Lines and the captain of the ferry were liable for the tragedy. The report blamed human error. During a trial several years after the tragedy, the court said that on examination of the records, that there was a finding of fraud and negligence on the part of Sulpicio Lines, and that the risk taken by the captain proved fatal to the passengers. It also noted that the cargo of the Princess of the Stars had not been disclosed during inspection, which was fraudulent and reckless. In 2015, a Manila court ruled in favor in 71 cases, awarding a total of P241 million in damages. However, to date, the claimants have yet to receive the compensation and are still pending an appeal in higher courts. Sadly, if the ferry had decided not to depart that day because of the weather, this disaster could have been avoided. Our hearts go out to the families of the victims of that fateful day. May your loved ones always be remembered. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel to view other content.